From the Lergus point of view, so we're a national agency for Erasmus+, and we've been working with youth workers who do amazing work on youth mobility. And sometimes they do it, because there's such a huge commitment to it, but also they have huge skills in this area that aren't recognised. And I think we wanted to demonstrate to them both the importance of kind of recognising that this is an expertise that you have, and these are important skills and competences, and looking for a way we could do that, I suppose. And that was one of the main kind of reasons for us, is that we saw the expertise and people and organisations who've been working on this for 10 years and the amount of experience that they had built up. We also found, as most of you might know, in terms of when national agencies work, we work on a training and cooperation plan. And a lot of these courses are amazing opportunity for youth workers to learn about particular themes or skills or development. But we also feel that we do a lot of these courses and we wanted the opportunity to go a bit deeper, because 3 to 5 day courses, you can only go so deep in terms of learning and what you can get into. So we're looking for something that we could go just a little bit deeper. The other issue that we had as a national agency, I suppose, and we see that there's a lot of youth workers that are incredible champions for youth mobility. And you see them doing amazing work for a few years, and then they either leave the organisation and nothing happens, so that kind of experience is lost to the organisation, or else they get tired, maybe they have small children, they can't do as much travelling. So that's also, if it's one person in an organisation, it often is that they're the people who are really committed and championing this. And we find that the short courses are really good for that personal learning, but how do you build organisational capacity on this issue? And how does the personal learning link to organisational learning? And these are the kind of issues we were thinking that this programme that we've designed, that we'll talk to you about, would help us with. And I suppose that's where we were coming from. So, and then the last area was, I suppose, we've done the course for 3 years, so we have a group of people now who have graduated from the course, having a kind of group of people who we can say are experts in this area, and working with them in terms of ongoing activities that we can support them with, was really important for us, that we have our own kind of panel of youth workers that are really expert and have that recognition as well, that we could have an ongoing relationship with them. So that's from our point of view. I'll hand over to Hilary in terms of her own perspective.
So I'm Hilary Tierney. I work for the Department of Applied I work for the Department of Applied Social Studies in Maynooth University. A couple of things about Maynooth that these two photographs represent. Maynooth is a funny university in the sense that it can claim to be both one of the oldest universities in Ireland from, I never remember whether it's 1793 or 1795, but also one of the newest universities. So we share a campus. On the left you'll see St. Patrick's College Maynooth. So it was a pontifical college, a pontifical university, and was founded in the late 1700s. And in fact, our department came out of that college, and that college would have had a very strong sort of commitment to social justice and to human rights through, we were originally a centre of sociology, of applied sociology. And the university, as I said, is now established as a national part of the National University of Ireland system since 1997. But we as a department have been around since the 1980s. And I think that's one of the important things about partnership. We'll sort of throw in things as we go along, is that they take time. And that this wasn't a case of Lergus and the Department of Applied Social Studies never knowing each other and an approach being made. This was built on pre-existing relationships. This was built on, I suppose, the university seeing itself, and the department in particular, seeing itself as a practice-based department. So our primary business is the education and training of youth workers for what's nearly approaching 40 years now, which feels a bit scary, particularly given that I was one of the first. I did the programme in 1985, which definitely makes me feel very old sometimes when I think about it. But we have, and as part of that, we've always operated and I suppose done a balance between being successful within the academy, so within the institution, but also seeing that our credibility and our success as a department was also needed to be built on engagement with the field. that that's a key part of our commitment. And so as a department, we maybe are a little bit unusual, is that we have a mission statement that we revisit. So the same as a lot of your organisations. Well, who are we and what are we here for? And our mission statement, I think, we have a commitment to social change. But we also have a commitment there that our strongest piece is around human rights, social justice, equality, and then how do we do that? Because we're not a practitioner organisation, we are an academic institution, however uncomfortable that might feel at times. So we do that through our education and our teaching, our engagement, our research, our public contributions. So as a department, we're already open to that. And I think I was really heartened to see a number of people here from ministries and from institutions, because I think one of the things that we really need to do between the academy and the field is get curious about each other and get interested in each other and see what it is that we have in common. So over the years, people from the department, some people will be familiar with Professor Maurice Devlin, is obviously very well known in a lot of the European youth work and youth policy work. And so for a long time, Maurice would have been a point of contact with LERGA, so we would sit on selection committees, we'd be part of conversations, so we would see ourselves as going out, and I think that's really important, just crossing a line in some way between the academy and the field, and then also over the years inviting LERGAs in to come and talk, to give workshops in the department. So that's an important part of it, is we sort of grew a relationship slowly until then this seemed like a reasonable conversation. Before we get into the detail though, I'll give you a little bit of information. Big thing, most people probably know, as I said, Ireland, centre of Europe, we like to think about that ourselves. Small country, not as small as Slovenia, but still a relatively small country, and that makes a difference. So relationships in Ireland have a tendency to be quite personal. There is a government commitment to youth work and to youth work education and training. We again have a growing youth population, so there is more of a concern with youth and youth issues. We have, I suppose, an origins of Irish youth work, I think are important in terms of how we understand things. So we were, I suppose we depends on the language used, we were part of the British Empire. We were a colony. In Ireland, you'll often hear people talking about 800 years. So we have 800 years of colonisation. And so our youth work is very influenced, and our approach to youth work was originally very influenced by youth work developments in England. And so you can see, one of the things I think is always interesting about this is that it started as one thing with one set of intentions and became something else. So the early days of youth work in Ireland were very much sort of adopted and adapted for the project of nation building. So in Irish youth work, there's a couple of things that are very important. Nationality, Irishness, and the church. And that for very many years that Irish youth work was done primarily on a voluntary basis, in local parish halls, by volunteers, by voluntary organisations, some of which have become very large now, but based on a principle primarily of voluntarism. And this is interesting in terms of when we start having a conversation about education and training of youth workers, because there are still very, very many more voluntary youth workers than there are paid professional youth workers in the Irish context. And that sort of makes an interesting conversation about education and training. And we not only have young people participating on a voluntary basis, we have tens of thousands of adults giving their time on a voluntary basis, but also that youth work is largely provided by voluntary organisations. So the youth workers that Anne and others in LERGAs would have been engaging in are largely working in voluntary organisations dotted around the country, generally affiliated to a couple of larger organisations. And this gives you a sort of a sense of the sector. I put NYCI in the centre, just for you. But it is important because we have that the NYCI provides a very particular function. It's been around since 1969, and it is a really interesting hub around which a lot of interesting conversations about youth work happen. But what you'll see here then is largely large voluntary type organisations who engage with volunteers on a big scale, but also with paid staff. And one of the things, I suppose, when we think about the sector overall, is we have quite a small number. So the research, again, commissioned by the National Youth Council of Ireland, in 2012, in the middle of the whole conversation about evidence and outcomes and economic value. That whole conversation hasn't gone away. Is we can see that there was youth work, a lot of young people engaged, a lot of volunteers, over 40,000, and then a much smaller number of paid staff. But in a way, it's that pool, in a funny way, this programme is largely aimed at that pool, the people who are currently working as paid staff in youth work organisations. They may have a formal qualification in youth work, they may have another qualification, they may have no qualification. People might, and there are still, a number of people in the Irish context who are youth workers by virtue of experience, by decades of experience. But it's that small pool of people that we were interested in working with. Okay. Quick things. You've heard this. Ireland has a Youth Work Act. People say, "Oh, that's great. You have an act, and it is good." But there's always the question when you have a Youth Work Act about who defines it. And so you end up with, we've had increasing government involvement in youth work and sort of shifting the direction of youth work somewhat. We have a government department, a Department of Children and Youth Affairs since 2011, a full ministerial post, a full seat at the cabinet. I suppose we would have to say from a youth work perspective that the youth work and the youth element of it is a much smaller part of the portfolio, no matter how important we think it is. But it is a significant part of our landscape. We have a policy that talks about talks about young people, and I suppose we have a lot in youth work really begun to be sort of strategic about these and using these outcomes to hang a number of youth work type provision around. And you could certainly argue in lots of ways that a lot of the work that we might do in terms of European mobility would speak specifically to the one about people being connected, respected, contributing.
This might be a bit of outside the scope of this workshop, but it's always interesting to see these kind of national guidelines, national policies, and see how history is reflected in them as well.
Yes.
If I look at, for example, this, in a Finnish policy, I probably wouldn't see achieving written in this way, although the same idea is probably there, like self-fulfillment and all this. But, for example, safe and protected, that's a perspective that isn't that strong for us.
No.
It kind of reflects the youth work tradition.
Absolutely. Well, anybody who knows Ireland knows that it is a huge issue. Child protection, we have a very unhappy history in terms of institutional abuse and abuse of children in particular. So since 1999, we've had a particular obsession with the issue of of safety and well-being and protection of children. There's questions to be asked about it, but I think that's really important because our vision of ourselves gets reflected in that. The important thing, though, is that this is a framework, an all-government and all-department framework for young people, not for youth work. And what's interesting in this is you'll actually find very little reference to youth work. So I think that's one of the things. So youth work still has to find the spaces for itself. But one we also have following that, we have a national youth strategy. But here we go, professionals and volunteers working with young people are respected, valued, and appropriately supported. And I think that was one of the things that we try and pick up on these programs, is the issue of recognition, and it's maybe one of the conversations that you might like to have. We don't have a commitment in Ireland to the idea that everybody employed in youth work should have a professional qualification, but we do have a system of professional qualification, and increasingly youth workers, those employed as youth workers on a full-time basis, are required to have a recognised professional qualification. And that is, I suppose, part of the backdrop. So from when we designed this programme, part of it, I suppose, is that we wanted to design it in a way that would give some recognition to youth workers, and that would also allow them to be able to claim a space in their organisation and in the larger field around having a particular sort of expertise. And I suppose in the Irish context, education and educational achievement, so going back to that word, is actually really important. It's part of our history. And again, it would be part of our history because of our history of emigration and the idea that an education was what got you out of poverty. So we're very committed to education and educational achievement and recognition of that. So I'm going to hand over back to Anne. I think the big thing we really want to say, though, is we're not saying in this case, and it is just a case study, that this is what everybody needs to go out and do. What we'd like to do is tell you some of the story of the programme, and then really open up the floor to look at, well, what might work, what wouldn't work, what worked in the partnership, what are some of the questions. And really, I suppose, try and create a space for you to have some conversations about if you did want to cross those boundaries in your own countries, what might be some of the things that you could do or some of the things that would support that. Okay?
So I'll go through now what the programme is about, but feel free to ask questions if anything isn't clear, or if you want a bit more information, because I won't go through everything, but just to kind of give you a feel for what the programme looks like. So that's backwards. So just to let you know where the course sits, I suppose, in terms of recognition. So here we have the European qualifications framework, and then we have our own national qualifications framework mapped against it. And where we are, where this course is at this level 8. So that will be the equivalent of level 6 on a European level. So it's a pretty high level, and it goes for 20 European credits. So it's not a full kind of degree, but it is in terms of what we're looking at, depth of learning. That's the depth of learning that we're looking, and I suppose the recognition as well that we want to give the learning. So the aim of it was really to develop. It's a very these phrases here are taken from our guide for the programme. So they're quite broad, and it's looking at the knowledge, skills, and competence in terms of high quality mobility project management. So it's looking at both the sort of big picture and the theories around it, but also the practical implementation of these projects. So the objectives then are looking at knowledge of the national and European context, because we find just having that, a bit like you were just saying there, having the context of knowing, well, why is Erasmus there? Why is it being funded? Why is this policy there? Really helps people to understand the role of it in their work, understanding the principles and practice, and then just organising and undertaking a European mobility project and the stages within that. So that's the kind of big picture, but I just want to show you also just what it looks like in terms of structure. So we have 3 modules. The national and European context, the principle and practice skills, and then the mobility project management. So we have, each module is 3 days, so we bring people together 3 times in the year for 3 days each, and it's quite intense. They're residential days. We do 1 study visit to Finland, and part of that is, using that experiential learning approach when you're doing mobility, that the students themselves have the opportunity to do a mobility, and that they reflect on their learning as if, what was my experience like, what would it be like for a young person. And we were delighted. We've run the course for 3 years. We were particularly delighted this last year that we've just finished with them last week. We had 3 Finnish participants working with us. So we find that the peer learning is such an important part of it. So everyone has different levels of experience. Having international participants and not just Irish participants really adds to that, both the intercultural dimension but also the peer learning part of it. So we're hoping when we run the course again that we'd be able to work with other countries and have participants from other countries as well as Finland. So the other part of it, I suppose, this is what's different to working in formal and non-formal. There's homework. So there's 5 assignments that are part of it. And it's really interesting because that never happens in any other sort of training that we do in Lerga. Certainly it's all trainings, and there's certain recognitions or levels and certificates, but assignments and homework don't tend to be part of this work. So just to give you a feel for what the modules look like and what kind of topics we cover. We cover self-awareness and personal effectiveness. We cover that. Some people wonder why we cover that, but project management, we feel, is very much about your own personal effectiveness and having that self-awareness of how you manage projects and how you work with people. So we cover that from that point of view. We cover the different stages of project management, the sort of challenges and the opportunities of youth mobility, the organisational levels. So we look at very much the sort of role of young people, the youth workers, organisations and community. We look at those levels throughout the course. And then we look at youth policy both at European and national level. So just some pictures. This was actually last week. This is our final module of this year. So it's just to kind of, we find sometimes when we say we're working kind of on it's a higher education accredited course, people feel that and it's a lecture theatre and there's somebody talking to them and they're taking notes. But you can see this is the kind of activities which isn't that different, I suppose, to what you'd see in a lot of TCA activities and trainings. So we're using non-formal methods throughout the thing. This was our study visit to Finland, where we went and met youth work services in Finland, and we were kind of looking at the differences, I suppose, between Irish and Finnish youth work. And we got different presentations. We had a young person presenting on their research on the impact of youth mobility, looking at what they've learned from it. So we try and make it very, that it's not just two trainers talking to people, that it's different approaches and they're getting different perspectives, I suppose, throughout the programme. But I suppose then you could ask, what's the difference then? Is it just a long training course? And I suppose that's where we get into what's the difference between this programme and a training course that's over 3 to 5 days. And I suppose it goes back to that level 8 learning, and it's that kind of deeper learning in terms of, I suppose, a more critical analysis and looking at the theories as well behind what we're doing. And I suppose one of the discussions that was interesting that we had in one of the first modules when we were looking at European policy, a lot of it can be like, here's the policy, what can you do to contribute to it, how can you use it in your work? But we kind of got a bit behind that and we're asking, well, why is that European youth policy there? Who does it help? And having a more kind of critical analysis so that people kind of see, if you do that more in-depth kind of work and learning, we feel that it's so important questioning these things for the young people and the youth workers. But also, when a new policy comes in, they're at the same level in terms of questioning. They're not always just thinking, well, that's the policy, I must look at it or link it to my work. So it's that depth. But also, I suppose, as well as the workshops, we do get them to do reading, and that wouldn't normally be part of what you're doing in a training course in non-formal education. But we evaluate, the assignments are a very big part of it, and just to give you a feel of what kind of assignments, we really try and make sure that the assignments are relevant to their work, so that they're not something that they do and then they file away and aren't using, that it helps them in their work. So the first assignment is an essay on how your work contributes to European youth policy. They do a K1 application form as an assignment. They do a presentation of their learning on the study visit. And then the size of these boxes is relevant to the amount of kind of percentage of points awarded for each assignment on the course. But the biggest assignment is really developing a European development plan for their organisation. And we found this assignment in particular is really important in terms of helping that learning go into the organisation level. So in a sense, their homework is to consult with young people in their organisation, with their board, with their management team, and talk about how to integrate youth mobility into their organisation. And what we take very much is a formative approach in assignments. So we're not looking at assignments to check with our red pen, did they get it right or wrong? It's a very formative approach. So with the European Development Plan, there's 2 steps. They do a presentation of where they are, and we give them feedback on how to improve it. So our role is supporting them to the best possible plan that they can do, rather than checking if they got something right or wrong. And that's the approach to all of the assignments. So when we give feedback in assignments, we're giving them feedback of how to improve their work rather than what they got wrong. And throughout that, then the last assignment is the reflective journal, and that's an ongoing assignment throughout the year where they kind of note their reflections and their learnings throughout the programme. So there's nothing kind of that is very different in terms of what they could do as an organisation anyway. I mean, these are things, and when we look at it, we try and look at the skills part. So, for example, the presentation, a lot of that is around youth workers do need to be able to present their work, so there's important skills there. With the European Development Plan, the sort of advocacy part of their work, is important, so we really try and kind of support them in advocating for youth mobility in their organisation, and we do workshops even on how to persuade people in your organisation and what you can work with on that. So it's looking at whatever they learn they can use in their organisation rather than learning for the sake of it, which, you know, rightly or wrongly, a lot of people conceive more formal education, or certainly some people's experience of it can be more about that.
Can I say something about that too? I think that we very deliberately, like, we put a lot of energy, and I'll talk a little bit later just about some of the steps it took, because it was all very well for us to have these bright ideas. Let's design this program and it'll take 100 hours and we'll organise it like this and it'll be great. But this actually had to go through a whole process within the university of being presented to the new programs committee, of getting feedback from the faculty, of being amended, of being changed, of being approved, being registered. So it is the fact that it is an NUI certificate, the National University of Ireland certificate, is something that takes time. But I suppose the really important bit of it is, from our point of view, is that didn't mean the recognition, the formal recognition of the programme didn't mean that we had to use formal methodologies. And I think that's the big learning out of this. I would really like that, having this sort of partnership means. So we designed the assessments, the curriculum and the assessments for purpose. You know, that the programme was designed to enable students, once they had left the programme, to be able to do certain things, to understand certain things, to be able to act in certain ways. So we felt very strongly that the methodology should support that and that the assessment should confirm it. And I suppose we're lucky, I'm very conscious that in some university contexts that maybe people don't have those sort of flexibilities around assessments, or maybe feel that they don't. But we feel like increasingly universities are thinking about graduate attributes, thinking about the capacities that people need to be able to have and demonstrate at the end, and we think these sort of approaches really sort of feed into that.
How long does that process take at a university level? Is it how long is a piece of string?
It's a bit of how long is a piece of string. We've worked on one other certificate and I think it probably took us 2 years, but this one probably took about a year. You know, it took about a year. And the other thing I suppose that's important is when we work in partnership is the certificate, the ownership, for want of a better word. So it's funny, the programme, the activities belong to Lurgus, but the title belongs to the university. So the students are students of the university, they're registered to the university, they have all the rights and the privileges and the responsibilities of being university students, and they get their certificate at the end in a conferring attended by the university. So, you know, there's sort of interesting bits to that piece as well. But yeah, about a year.
Yeah, and I think that feeling of being part of the university, you know, the library visit, the student card, all helps with that. But even the graduation, you know, that they get a photograph that they can show in their organisation, and that kind of recognition. You know, we always say it about, you know, with youth exchanges, with Youth Pass, that they do that with young people. It really works, giving that sense of achievement. But it's important with youth workers as well. So the other thing it's been a significant investment, I suppose, from our national agency and for the participants as well, a year-long programme, the assignments, all of that work as well. So we've been really interested, especially because it's a different type of approach, I suppose, we do to a lot of training, is to kind of evaluate from the point of view of getting the feedback from the participants throughout the project, so that we're not just kind of thinking, well, we think this is good, that we're really trying to see if they think there are changes that need to be made as it goes on, and particularly we're looking at how they use their learning, and that's what we're really interested in. So when we finish the course, we do obviously an evaluation at the end, but we're just getting their kind of reactions at that stage, I suppose, to how they found the learning. What we're really interested in is we've done questionnaires with people between 1 and 2 years after they finished the course, and asked them questions. How did you use that learning? And what, if they found they used the learning, what in particular helped you use that learning? So that's the real bit that has helped us improve the course as it goes on, because when you kind of hear, actually, this assignment really helped me think about how we could link this to the organisation from a group of people, that you can see how that can work then in supporting their learning. So I'm just going to show you a few quotes, I suppose, from the evaluation from students. So when we ask that question about how you use your learning, so this idea of, since doing the course I feel like an expert, and that can be a big thing. I mean, people can find it hard to call themselves an expert even if they are an expert. If they have 10 years experience in youth exchanges, they mightn't feel that they're an expert. And I think that's where the kind of recognition of the learning has been important. So another quote is around understanding policy, practice and implementation. I've broadened my knowledge of theory. Before I was hands-on practice and not much theory. So this idea of kind of just implementing projects, and that was one of the things, I suppose, from Malerga's point of view, we were finding what we want in terms of the sustainability of the Youth in Action programme is that more and more organisations don't see youth exchanges as a nice summer scheme you do on top of your ongoing work. What we want to do, and that's why we want the integrated at the organisation level, we want them to see it as a tool for youth work. And it's integrated into their planning in terms of their outcomes with young people, and it's a tool to achieve these. So what we think that quote at the end that somebody said, a clear knowledge of how youth work strategies align with national and local strategies and how European work can assist in the delivery of local objectives. That's the kind of thing that tells us that they're able to kind of integrate it more into a local level and a local need, that it's addressing local needs. So it becomes from a nice thing to do, youth exchanges, to a necessary thing to do. And we think that's the more sustainable impact, I suppose, of youth mobilities. So there was particular feedback on assignments, and this is really interesting because no one likes doing homework, and that's the most difficult thing. But this is just a quote from one participant where she said, I think the highlight of the whole course, in hindsight, was the terrible reflective essay. I really struggled with it, I really hated it, and realised now why it was important, and halfway through I really began to question myself. So it's the having to do an assignment really helped in terms of that learning and their self-reflection and their questioning what they do, because it's relatively easy to be a participant when you have to go home and really think about the work, and that's what the assignments kind of were designed to do. That's where we kind of got the real kind of integration in terms of the learning. The European Development Plan, we got a lot of feedback on how people use that in their work. So the last part of the programme was developing the European Development Plan. So that puts you in a different chair when you're sitting down with the board and saying that's what I think we should do. People really are buying into it. So it's that kind of the assignment is giving them a tool in their organisation that will help them kind of, I suppose, advocate for youth mobility. And this is just interesting because these are non-formal youth workers, that the academic parts of the course are the most helpful because these were often the very new parts to them, whereas they had more experience in using non-formal approaches. So someone then saying, from talking to my manager, we're going to make it part of everyone's work plan to do European work. This is all new, so I'll coordinate and help people through the admin side of things. It's not just me in a corner doing it anymore. So when we hear these kind of things, when I was saying at the start that it's often one lonely youth worker really motivated and championing this idea, when we're doing this course to demonstrate to them that you need to bring people with you on this youth mobility, and it can't be just one person in an organisation, that you're supported within your organisation. Another interesting feedback was around having done the course, I wasn't going to be doing things for the sake of it. I wanted to do projects that are going to further the organisation. So again, using it as a tool for the organisation. And there's a big market for poor quality projects, but we're not interested. So it's around the quality, I suppose, in terms of how they use. They're not doing things for the sake of it. The other part of what we didn't just ask the participants, we also asked organisations, so organisations or manager or some board level with some people, what they thought of it. And I suppose what wasn't so much what they thought of the course, they weren't on the course. Had they seen any changes or impact from sending one of their youth workers on the course? So you can see quotes like, prior to the programme I would have seen youth mobility as a bit of a luxury, now I see it as an opportunity. We want to push ourselves to bring people with more complex organisational needs and go outside of our own comfort zone. we will see a higher impact. And that was one of the things we used a lot of the evidence from Ray about the impact of youth mobility being much larger with disadvantaged young people. So, you know, when they saw that, then they could see how they could use it. It wasn't just for some of the young people they worked with, it was for a larger group. We're coming to the end of our strategic plan. European youth work will be in our next strategic plan. So these are the kinds, it was different in every organisation depending on where they are, but these are the kind of things that make us really happy when we see them, because that's where we see the sustainability of the learning, and that it's not just a good experience for the participant, but it kind of links into organisational level. I have a handout that I'll give you, just kind of describes the course and some case studies, and it just gives you examples of how people, I suppose, in their organisation have used the learning. So, any questions on the course or how we do it, or Jean-Marie?
If you had youth workers that hadn't experience of doing mobility exchanges, is it you need to have had some experience really to partake and do the assignments?
Yeah, it's interesting. We thought that at the start, but then we had a lot of applications from people who were really interested in it. So we had quite a mix of experience in the group, and actually that worked really well because that peer learning. So some people might have had 10 years, some people were starting off. But I think to do the course they had an interest and commitment to it, and you know, had some of them were, as young people, had opportunities to do it. So there was something there with them, but they were, and they also had the opportunity to be able to implement the learning.
When you developed the program and you set the program, did you establish from the beginning some criteria to take part into the program, to be available to be part of the program?
Yeah.
Did you establish criteria?
We probably have our different, you know, from our point of view as a national agency, we were really looking at that they were coming from an organisation, they had organisational support, because our thing was, it was to bring it back into the organisation. So if it was a kind of someone just working on their own, it wasn't going to work as well from them. In terms of the academic criteria, we were also
technical pieces, and I suppose we were lucky, like we were able to work as we went along. So I mean, I explained, like, we have to do within the university, we have to do a new program proposal. You have to make the case for it. So then we have to do, I suppose, a lot of what the youth workers had to do in the European, in the development plan. We had to say why this was important, why this was worthwhile doing. We had to talk about Lurgus. We had to talk about, you know, why how it would fit with the university strategic objectives and all of that. So we would have batted that backwards and forwards. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose that's the bit about a partnership, is that the big thing is about the match. Is we're not the same. We don't have the same information, but we have a common goal. And then the bit is about where we bring our different areas of expertise. But I suppose in terms of the selection criteria, so we did. So people are interviewed, you know, for the program. I think that's really important. It's not just open-ended. People's organisations are asked to commit to the program. But I mean, that's not an academic requirement. That's something we agreed. In order for this to be the most useful, we would agree those. They weren't designed to exclude people, but they were designed to ensure that there was the maximum benefit possible might come out of it. And I suppose the other bit of it is that people actually had to have a place to practice. Do you know what I mean? Because this is not just theoretical learning. They actually had to be in a position that they could use the learning. And as you were saying, is the big thing is we're looking to try and do here, I suppose, a cultural change. Do you know, it's a bit like that sort of the multiplier effect. It's like we'll never be able to educate all of the youth workers that need to be educated, but we can educate them to help to make change in their organisations and change the organisational culture. That will help. In the university system, there were a couple of criteria that are important. Like a very simple one is the age. People had to be 21 on the year that they were applying. You know, they had to be able to be registered students of the university. They had to participate. There was an 80% participation requirement for the programme. All elements of the assessment were mandatory. Each had to be passed separately, you know, so we were very conscious of those. And I suppose the other bit is that is that while we work on it together, and both myself and Morris also teach on the programme and contribute to the programme, but the bulk of the work is done by Lurgus and by Anne in particular with a team of people. But then we meet, we talk, we agree the assessments, we agree the programme, but I suppose we're there a little bit when it comes to the delivery piece, because the other thing we want to be able to do is to maximise, as you said, there's a financial, cost to this. So it's actually better value in lots of ways, to be honest about it, for Lurgus to provide the staff nominated and supported by us than for people to work through the university system, because you get to that's what the organisation gives. So the organisation provides the staff, provides the venue, provides the day-to-day support, and then what it means is then that's the only reason, that's one of the reasons the programme is viable, is to be able to do that, is that a lot of the day-to-day work is not done. And then, just to be clear, is once the programme is approved, it's up on the university system, it's up on the national system, it is at level 8, and one of the reasons we put it at level 8, because people might say, God, that's high level, it's an honours degree level, but in Ireland, there is a very strong move towards the professionalisation of youth work and the benchmarking of the professional qualification at level 8. And so we wanted this standard there. We wanted for people to say this is a professional level qualification. So it stands as a special purpose award on the Irish qualification system. So it's about a particular sort of expertise, I think. And then basically what happens is the work comes back in. It is moderated as part of the university system in terms of quality and consistency. So we would meet and talk about that and review the work. And then the work is also then put through the university exam board system. So it's pretty much like, but I mean, it I suppose mirrors our approach as a department. This is not something that we do that's different. Our professional youth work, community work programs would very much follow the same sort of model in terms of, the non-formal methodologies. But the challenge really is, I mean, the key bit is the bit about the assessment. That's where the recognition piece comes from, and that's maybe one of the conversations to have.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions before we wanted to get you talking?
Are the students, do they have contact with young people during their course?
Yeah.
Do they have like a placement or?
Well, they're all
already working.
professional working youth workers, so they're doing this kind of on study days or days off. So that's also why when we were looking at how we'd do the course, that we grouped the modules into residential days. So there wasn't like every Tuesday you have to be. It was easier for people to come from all over the country.
Really important in the Irish context was to have the geographical spread, not to be just a programme for people from the eastern part of the country who could get to. So the richness of the learning has been really important.
So we have that both urban and rural, but they're all we do the course from Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. On Monday they're doing their youth work. So, and that works really well as well, because the reflection, when they go back and working with young people, they can talk to them, and that consultation part is so important, and it means they can implement the learning, much more quickly than it's not theoretical learning then, it's very practical.
What I'm thinking is, when you work, especially if you use mobility, there's two kind of groups and group dynamics to deal with. One is the youngsters, okay, but after you have also the group of partners that are creating projects. So it's another dynamic. So in the program, you provide directly with partners already the projects, so they are participating and this part is already done. And also you prepare them later when they have to organize, propose, and manage also a group of partners. So this particular aspect of partnership is treated now and you prepare them. It's very important. This is one of the collapsing
Absolutely,
aspects.
And we have some, so we do really interesting things with that. So we talk about the intercultural learning when you're working with partners. We talk about things like power in partnership. So we talk about those kind of big picture issues, about how when you're working with partners, that you have common goals, the sort of more theory about how you're working. But we also talk at a practical level about how you work and find partners and all of this. So, and then, you know, some of them already have partners that they've worked with, some of them would be looking for new ones. So it's just supporting, and we always say to them that the quality of projects a lot of the time depends on the quality of the relationship with partners, that having that good partnership is so important to ensure the quality of your mobility programs. So yeah, that is covered as well very much. Yeah.
Didn't understand two things, maybe sorry for silly question, but
No.
is it 3 residential days
Yeah.
a week, a month, or in general 3
So we do 3 days in November, we do 3 days in January, and we do 3 days in March. In May, sorry, and then we do the study visit in March, so it's spread out. And actually that's really helpful, because if we did, you know, 9 days all together, you wouldn't have the same learning as spreading it out, because there's time to reflect between the modules, and, you know, they're back at work and seeing how they can implement it. Yeah. That's not a silly question at all, we should have made that clear.
And the other one was people participating in the course. Are they students of the university for something what is broader, or they just sign up for this course and that's all?
No, they just sign up for this program, so they're registered to this program, but of course they are considered full students of the university. So they come to the university for registration, they get their student cards, which is, I think, a significant thing for people, is to have that. They come and they learn about they come and do a session in the library, all about the library access, particularly around the electronic access to the library work. So they are students of the university for 1 year. And I think the other bit of it, I suppose, that's important is that it's these programs, so people may be familiar with the European credit transfer system, but you're looking roughly, you know, each 5 credits equates to in and around 24, 25 hours of contact. But of course, and so that's one thing, but that's only a very minor part of it. Is the other bit is that's where the assessments come in. It's all the work that people have to do. So in effect, the program probably takes somewhere between 400 and 500 hours of work on behalf of the student. Do you know?
Does it also mean that, okay, there is this program of this thing, right? But then are they eligible also to take part in other activities of the university?
They are. I mean, they are. But in reality, because they are all working and they come, they're geographically very dispersed. They become their own group, and the contact is within the group. But they are, of course, eligible to do that. But in reality, I think some of the ones who live closer to Dublin might come out to the library, physically out to the library, and use the library. But in effect, most of their sort of identification with the university is through the processes, I suppose, both in terms of the teaching that we do and in terms of the assessment and the celebration and the graduations at the end. But yeah, it's an issue. It's an issue. I mean, anybody who's done it themselves, it's an issue when you're trying to work and study.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the thing, is about what the priorities are, and the priorities are to attend this program.